Hello, everybody. Welcome to this incredible forum on effective ways to be in ministry online beyond worship. We've spent a lot of time this year learning how to do online worship in a variety of ways using multiple platforms. And wow, have we done a good job all the way across the connection from the smallest to the largest churches. This is an opportunity to expand our thinking on that because now we've built online congregations. And the question is, how do we minister to those congregations? What are some of the unique things that we are doing or discovering or thinking about doing that will help us in our engagement with people? And so today we have a panel of incredible people from varying size churches across our annual conference. And I'm thrilled that they're taking the time with us. If you have a question or a comment that you want to share, please use the chat feature. Kim Shockley is here, and she's going to be monitoring that for me so I don't have to pay attention. But anyway, we are so glad that you've joined us. This will be recorded, so you'll be able to share it with others, and we'll let you know where the link of that will be. So we're going to dive right in because an hour is going to go really, really fast. And one of our panelists today is Rebecca Holland from Christ Community Liswyn. Did I pronounce that correct? Liswyn Church, right?
Yes, yeah, Lisbon
Okay,
and Christ Community.
all right. And I was really interested in some of the things that you shared with me about your work with Association of Ministers with Disability and the United Methodist Disability Community. I probably got that wrong, but you're going to bring us up to speed on what that is. This is intriguing to me. Please tell us about this and how it's helping.
So in the Susquehanna Conference, our small group related to disabilities is the Disability Ministries Task Force. And then the greater United Methodist Church, I also sit on the Disability Ministries Committee for that committee. We also have the United Methodist Association of Ministers with Disability, which is actually ecumenical, but mostly Methodist ministers with disabilities. I'm a person with low vision, and so one of the positive aspects of being visually impaired is I was already familiar with Zoom, and I actually already had an Apple iPad because iPads and Apple products are all accessible immediately right out of the box. Also, the blindness community was using Zoom before a lot of this started because it was a way for us to meet and to stay in touch with one another and to organize. So when we shifted to entirely online worship, it was a challenge, but it was also exciting in a way because I already had these tools, or we already had these tools available. We used iMovie in order to pre-record worship services. We used Zoom in order to lead online Bible studies. But one of the things I wasn't aware of, or one of the things I didn't know as much about, is closed captioning and making things accessible for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. One of the things we encountered in live streaming worship, and I know a lot of churches are doing live stream, is that many members of our congregation were having trouble hearing, which is a challenge, especially if you're just watching something on a screen. And so I can send a link. It's actually better, I think, to read some of this information. But the United Methodist Association of Ministers with Disabilities and the United Methodist Committee on Deaf and Hard of Hearing Ministries put together an entire page of resources, and I was able to help with that, about closed captioning videos, which I think is just helpful to even be aware that it's relatively easy to do and that it's available, because even people who aren't hard of hearing can benefit from closed captions. Zoom, as I said, is also really helpful because people can phone into Zoom. So whether you can see or whether you cannot see, Zoom can be accessible. So we've also actually had, since the pandemic started, some other friends who were members of the blindness community actually join our church family and join our online Bible studies, because now I'm offering Bible studies through Zoom, and before they were only in person. So the challenges, but also some of the new opportunities, I'm hoping that we can continue to carry forward in this post-COVID world we'll get to hopefully some days, being accessible in new ways.
Well, and that's, yeah, because that's a learning. That's an innovation that you're helping the rest of us to discover now. That's something that's going to go forward, I hope, forever.
And something that I'm hoping we continue to do is we've learned live streaming, once you get the hang of it, isn't too hard. So that's a way people who might not be able to physically enter many of our church buildings can be with us in worship. And I know that my church, at least, we wouldn't have even considered live streaming until this started, but now we're glad that we do.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, for all of you, I'm hoping that you as panelists will agree for folks to call you and say, hey, I heard this. I'd like more information. And if you have links like the one you just mentioned, we can post that on the website with this recording for any kind of resources that go along with what you're sharing with us. So you can send those to me and I'll make sure they get where they're supposed to be. And I think we have a question.
Well, she could also type that into the chat and then it would show up in the recording.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, I'll add it to the chat.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We're going to keep moving on because we have so many great things to talk about. David Carter, who is one of the pastors at Faith Church in Bellefonte, you're going to share with us some work that you're doing as it relates to discipleship. And I like the word that you use when you talk about leading people in rhythms. So I'm hoping that you will unpack that and share a little bit more with us. David, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Gary. So pre-COVID, which is kind of like BC at this point in life, we were definitely talking all about church online. We had a plan to come up with a plan in the next couple of years. And fortunately, for what it was worth, COVID helped us to just immediately be immersed in that, whether we wanted to be or not. And so we had a lot of dreams and aspirations about what that might look like and how we might best live out being a church that's online. But again, we were kind of pushed into that immediately, like many of us were. And one of the things that COVID challenged us with, but also helped us with, was to rethink from the ground up what we were trying to accomplish and how we could best accomplish it in the circumstances we were dealing with, in the cards that we were dealt. We realized, like most of us have for a very long time, but maybe had a hard time communicating or had a hard time moving forward, that the mission is what matters. The method that we do to accomplish that mission does not really matter. And so throughout COVID, we had to rethink, okay, what's our mission and how are we going to best accomplish that in the context that we find ourselves in? And our mission of discipleship is that we believe that all followers of Jesus are deepening and developing their relationship with God, with the people of God, which is the church, and with people who don't know God yet, which is the world. And this is what we call the three relationships. And the three relationships, kind of in a nutshell, is broken down. Each relationship, God, church, and world, is broken down into 5 different rhythms. And a rhythm isn't so much about like a to-do list. It's more about who are you becoming. So it's not what you do, it's who you're becoming. So instead of, hey, as a Christian, I need to read my Bible every day, we want to say, as Christians, my life is directed by God's word. Now, reading the Bible might help us to live out that rhythm, but reading the Bible in and of itself isn't what we're talking about. What we're talking about is our lives being directed by the Bible. And so pre-COVID, we did a couple of things to help our people deepen and develop their relationship with God, church, and the world through those 15 different rhythms. We did things like we had workshops. So last October, actually this January, we had 4 different workshops. One was on the rhythm of prayer, which is conversations with God overflow into every area of my life. We had a workshop on scripture. So we just talked about, hey, how do we read the Bible? We had a workshop on accountability, which is part of our relationship with the people of God. And we have also historically had a workshop on faith sharing. How do I tell the story about how Jesus has transformed my life? Well, in COVID, people didn't gather. Many people, you're probably finding at your churches, many people still aren't gathering. And so we shifted. So instead of gathering everybody and having them learn how to live out some of the things that help us grow in the rhythms, you following me there? Mm-hmm. Instead of teaching them how to grow in the rhythm, instead, we just invited everybody to be part of a movement where we're all living out the rhythms. And so actually this past Sunday, we just wrapped up a church-wide prayer walk where we invited anybody who worshiped with us, whether it was through church online or whether they gathered with us in person at one of our worship gatherings. we gave them a very short instruction sheet. I think it was 4 things. I should have come with these, but the 4 things were pick a place to walk, pray for God to bless the people who live there, pray for God's grace and love to be known by the people who live there, and then number 4 was simply to let us know. And so I called the county office, and I can see it right here. I'm going to grab it just for fun. And so we had this giant map printed out. And as people shared what streets they prayed, the people they prayed for, we highlighted on this map. And you can see in the corners that we have folks who gathered and prayed with us from Philadelphia, from Edders, from Florida, mostly across Pennsylvania. But in some ways around the world who worship with us. And what was awesome is it was a decentralized opportunity for us to live out our faith by both growing in our relationship with God through prayer, but also in being aware of the spiritual needs of the people who live around us. And so we had over 100 people, which is about 25% of our worshiping body, who participated, which is super awesome. And next we're talking about doing a Bible reading challenge as a church that we're thinking about calling 16 Days with Mark, where one chapter at a time, one day at a time, the whole church together, as many as will participate, will just read the book of Mark. And we might have a Facebook group that's part of that so that people are able to encourage one another, share things that they saw. And again, it's all about our mission is to help people deepen and develop their relationship with God, the church, and the world. Doesn't matter how we do that. And so in the digital world we live in, this was one thing that we did to help accomplish our mission.
Awesome. That's incredible. And I love the show and tell too, by the way. Nice touch.
I should have had it behind me prepared, but here we are.
The guitar looks good though. I like the guitar. One of the things that I'm going to ask all of you before we end this is to share very intentionally how you are connecting, how you are helping people online. What are the methods that you're using to get them connected to these various things that you're doing? I'd love to know how are you recruiting? How are you getting names? What channels are you using? Because I think that's going to be helpful. David, thank you for sharing all that. I love that. And I love the sense of rhythm too, God, church, and world. And staying focused on mission and the method will follow. Okay, so let's see. Is there, it just popped up. Any questions or any comments coming from the field, Kim? Okay. All right. Well, this is good. We're going to keep rolling. Ken Lawyer from Spry Church that also has now Pine Grove campus. And you're here to share with us some encouragement on how you're encouraging people through, encouragement posts on social media and maybe some of the other stuff you got going on. So enlighten us.
Thank you. I appreciated, what we've heard so far. And I can also say that for us as well, we've looked at what is our mission, what is our vision, and the methods can change and need to change in a time like this. But what remains the same is the mission and the vision. And for us at Spry, we have a statement of vision that uses the word Spry. It's a reference to our community, but also to the kind of church we aspire to be, a church that's lively, full of life. And so we've taken the word alive, and we've used each letter there as the basis for a key value. And those values are audacity, love, involvement, vitality, and encouragement. And Gary mentioned the word encouragement a moment ago, and that's the one I want to focus on here to say that for us, this idea of trying to connect with people during this season to encourage them really comes out of one of these core values of who we are and who we aspire to be as a church. And specifically when it comes to encouragement, what we mean by that is that we know we're called by God to share hope and to radiate hope to everyone. And we can do that in many different ways. This unique season obviously has provided some challenges, Like so many of the churches who are tuning in, we've seen people from our congregation really step up in some creative ways. And so for us, a key part of our engagement strategy during this season has been through what we just refer to as encouragement posts, as so many people are connecting online. Facebook as just one example, but a particularly good place. And so, we decided early on in this pandemic to do what we could as staff and leaders to go to the people. And while we were in that period where there was really so little, if anything, happening outside of our homes, we saw that as a special opportunity to be intentional in posting daily content through our website or our Facebook page that was aimed at encouraging people. And since then, we've adapted the practice, and we're not doing it quite as frequently, but for about 2 or 3 months, it was every single day where we divided it up among staff, and then some other key leaders got involved. So it wasn't overwhelming. And, I might have been producing a short video or post maybe once every 7 or 8 days, for example. And we just had it worked out so that every day there was some new content being added. And we encouraged people who were doing these posts to be creative and to share. So sometimes it was a simple 1 or 2 minute reflection with a thought for the day. Sometimes it was reflecting on a verse of scripture, or just sharing honestly about a struggle related to this strange season, mentioning maybe where we find hope and joy during this time. And we encouraged people just to be authentic in sharing. And also we encouraged people to mix in some humor, because I'm just convinced that we need to laugh more, especially in the midst of challenges like this. And we found that people really resonated with this. They caught on very quickly that every day there was new content being posted, and then often we would get comments, we would get shares and likes, and it was a way of maintaining and developing a connection with people at a time when really it was very difficult to gather together. And then we've since extended the idea to include ministry updates, so that people know, these are some of the ways in which we together as the church are part of God's mission in this time. And these are some of the ways in which our church specifically is serving our community. And so, one of the most popular ideas that we've come up with wasn't original to us, but we've kind of modified it, and we've sent a traveling choir that we call our curbside choir to go out to people, particularly shut-ins and others who for health reasons have not been getting out and about, and really to take a message of hope and joy and love and encouragement to them through music. So our choir director's done an amazing job with this, and it's pretty informal, but she puts the call out to people and looks for about maybe a group of 5, 6 people. So it's not even necessarily the full choir, but it's just like a subsection of the choir who go out usually on a Sunday afternoon and make maybe 5 or 6 different visits. And they'll spread out, and they'll stand in somebody's backyard or maybe on the porch if it's large enough. And then the people come out, or they listen through their windows, and they get to hear, people from their church sing some familiar songs, some hymns. If they want, they can sing along. There's a time of prayer. There's been some really meaningful ministry engagement that's happened through our curbside choir. And then the part about the ministry impact is we encourage people, when something like this happens, to take pictures, to be prepared to give a little report, basically, that could be shared online. So then we share through our website, through our Facebook page, through online worship, maybe even a little video clip that might have been taken of the people singing, or if not a video, just a couple pictures. And then, if there's a word of gratitude that someone shared who was on the receiving end, I mean, there have been some people who have really been touched by that simple gesture, some of them in tears, talking about how meaningful it was to them. Well, then we find ways to let the rest of the church know, hey, this is ministry that's happening. And even if you aren't there, even if you aren't part of it, in a sense, you are part of it, because we're the body of Christ together. And because of your prayers and your gifts and your support and, what you bring, what together we bring, God takes and blesses and multiplies, so that we're the church together, even during this time. So we enjoy getting those kinds of stories out. And it's a good way of reporting on what is happening, but it also can help people who haven't yet found a way to get connected or get engaged in a ministry, in a service area. Something might click with them when they see this update about this youth event or about that event over there that happened, or about this way we're serving teachers in our community by providing a coffee bar or something like that. It might actually click with people and make them want to say, I want to learn more about this and how I can get involved, and then the ministry impact can be multiplied. So in all those ways, we're seeking to share a message of hope and encouragement, that we are in ministry together in the name of Christ.
I think it's, yeah, as you're talking, the curbside choir, I'm picturing, Christmas carolers, right? Only in not as bad a weather at this point.
Yep.
But right now, as I talk to folks, anybody who's invested in the arts, whether it's visual arts or music or singing or instruments of that type of thing, what a great way to begin to incorporate some of those arts in terms of outreach. And I saw recently, I wish I could know where, but an artist was doing these like color transparencies, almost like Disney would create the Disney cells to create their movies. They do this beautiful picture on plastic, right? And they're doing that, and then they're sticking them to the outside of the windows of shut-ins. And so it could be like a flowers or some kind of beautiful artwork that they're transforming and using the windows, like the windowsills actually as the frames for these pictures. But I like that orientation of out there in the community. Appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. That's really cool. How we doing, Kim?
We're doing fine over here. I have one request from David. You mentioned 4 things that you asked people to do when they went out on our prayer walks. Would you type that into the chat for me?
Sure will.
4 things. Not 3, not 5, just 4. Well, I'm excited to also have Anna Layman Knox here, who is one of the pastors of Camp Hill United Methodist Church. And you have some interesting things in terms of sermon rewind sessions, Zooming small groups. And I really, baptism classes, you're not doing baptisms yet online, but you have baptism. So tell us about some of the stuff that you're working on. Sounds really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the things that we're doing connect really well with what we're hearing from other churches on this call, in that our goal is not just to be putting content out there for people to look at, but our goal is for whatever content we're sharing online or in person, for that to stimulate connection between individuals in the church community, between individuals in the church and the community, and then also obviously, between individuals and the relationship with God. And so, so we have a discipleship cycle that has 4 different areas in it, and those areas are being, connecting, doing, and discovering. So part of our goal in this COVID season is to ensure that there are ways that people in the congregation and community can connect in every one of those areas, and either virtually or in person, so both virtually and in person, depending on their level of comfortability. And so the way the cycle works is that we hope that there will always be on-ramps for new people in faith and next steps for people who've been in faith for a while, that they can take in each one of those areas of growth and discipleship. So we have a first step class that normally is in person, but we have been doing that online. And we've been so delighted that there have actually been brand new people to the church community in the past few months who are excited about just learning more about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus and what it means to be connected to Jesus through our community. And that's on Zoom. And so then the next step after that is next step baptism. So if folks are new to the community or new to Jesus and they're interested in being baptized or having a child baptized, then it's a 1 hour course. And again, it's on Zoom. And we have our next one's coming up actually on Sunday. And I'm so excited because I think there are actually 4 families that are all having their children baptized in the next 2 months. And yes, those baptisms are definitely in person and definitely in community, but socially distanced. But it's really exciting to see those families coming together in conversation, getting to know one another, learning more about what it means to be a part of the church community, and taking that next step together when so many of them, especially a lot of our families, we have a lot of families with small children in our church, and there is a wide variety of comfortability levels with whether or not people are okay with being in person. So some of those families are extremely isolated right now. And it's really been encouraging to be able to have some Zoom forums where they can come together and share stories and take their next step together. And then the next step after that is Next Step membership. And so we had a really exciting Next Step membership Zoom celebration a couple of Sundays ago, where all of the Next Step membership families and individuals got together on Zoom, and we did the new membership liturgy together with them on Zoom. And so there were little babies sitting on their parents' laps, vociferating, while the vows were being made. And we recorded all of that and made a short video, and then we showed it in our live stream worship on Sunday morning, with an opportunity for the live stream and the very few people who were in person congregation to give their response and their welcome. So that's been, it's just been really delightful to see people connecting in those ways with each other and with God. And I wanted to mention that we also have a congregation that, and I think this is true for us all, that has a wide variety of ages and a wide variety of different forms of access to technology. And so there are plenty of people in our church that never knew how to Zoom before, lots and lots and lots of people. And so there's actually a group of lay people in our church who recognized fairly on in the pandemic that there were a lot of people who were disconnected and really, really wanted desperately to be connected. And so they have done a really tremendous hands-on job of actually doing things like going out and sitting on people's front porches with them and programming their iPads for them so that they would be able to know how to get on to Zoom. That same group has made it possible for a number of folks to, the church has purchased CD players for a number of folks to have in their homes. And this group, we also mail them out, but we send out CDs and DVDs of worship so that people can, who have access to no other form of technology, are able to still connect to worship in that way. And those folks who are making those tech connections have discovered all kinds of other connections that are really deeply meaningful for people who have been struggling in this season. So that's been really encouraging as well.
Oh, are you going to talk about your new online campus?
Oh, sure, we can talk about that. But it hasn't been launched yet. So right. I think the thing that I would want to say about that is that I think you've probably talked about this in other teachings and webinars and things on worship, on online worship, but that we've recognized that, and I think others have too, that the way that we're currently doing live stream worship really is just a recording of our regular church services. And so there are a lot of things about those church services that people who are new to Christ or new to our church community really are not familiar with. Like, why do we go do a call to worship? Like, what is that about, and so when we launched this new online campus, our goal is really to create an opportunity for connection that is completely driven and aimed at people who've never been to church before, and that is kind of without some of those church trappings, or at least with explanation about why we do them, instead of just assuming that people know why. And our other goal with that online campus is really to directly connect it with the community around us, because we realize that there are a lot of pastors out there at really large churches who are doing awesome online experiences that anyone can watch at any time, but not everyone can connect with the Camp Hill community. So again, I heard Ken and I heard everybody talking about this, how the online and the community connection, the tangible connection of how we can actually interact with people on the ground, is just really, I think, really key in this season.
Cool. Well, and I think you give us a cautionary tale in terms of how we think about online worship going forward. Many of our churches have formed new congregations, whether they intended to or not, through the online presence. And the services that have been offered that have attracted folks and maybe retained them and helped them in discipleship are devoid of what we typically would do in our Sunday morning worship. We don't have a prelude with an organ, call to worship, all the other things that come in. I mean, a lot of us have streamlined worship, and that's what the people who've come to us have been used to. And I think the cautionary tale is, when I hear churches saying, when we're through this, we're going to continue doing online, but what we're going to do is just broadcast what we used to do on Sunday morning in our sanctuary service. And I'm like, now think about the people, that you've engaged, and they're like, oh, they'll get used to it. It's like, wrong. So I think that focus on how do we continue to promote online worship for those that are, that have kind of been acquainted with that. That's how they met us. That's the vehicle through which we are leading and teaching them, I think, is a good thing to remember. And Church of the Resurrection just had their Leadership Institute, last week or 2 weeks ago. And I was fascinated. Of course, Adam Hamilton can do pretty much anything he wants, but maybe he's doing online baptisms. I don't know. I don't think. But what they are doing is they're doing membership classes, and there are people from around the world who are joining Church of the Resurrection, and without having to move to wherever they are, out there, not Leewood, huh? I can't hear you, Kim.
Leewood, Kansas.
It is Lee, all right. And what they're doing is they're having members that are joining the church and carrying their mission extension out into their communities and taking videos and photographs and all the things that are happening with that expression of the life of the church, and sending those back to the mothership, so to speak, so that they can share them with all the other campuses, so that there's a sense that they belong together. Okay, that's the kind of thinking that comes out of COVID world. And I applaud that. I think it's the right way for us to go. But thank you, Anna, for sharing those. And as people have questions, and maybe they have one now, Kim?
Yes, we do have a question. What does community engagement look like online? I think that's for Anna. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that can take a lot of forms, but one of the things that we have done is as I think Ken mentioned, put out, or David mentioned this too, put out a specific call for some form of action that is community related. So like in the month of September, we had Be the Church challenges each Sunday during online worship. But the challenge was community related. So it was things like writing your a local teacher, a letter of encouragement, or writing a student a letter of encouragement, that kind of thing. So I think it's like making those personal connections, even if it's not actually in person with, because we have restrictions on that right now.
Yeah, and we can continue that conversation too in other ways that you all are doing that, making those connections in that challenge. I want to move to Frank. Frank Miller is the pastor of Zion East Prospect, and I'm intrigued by your backdrop. It looks like you're calling us from Italy. I want to know, how did you get out of the country?
There you go. How long will I have to stay?
and I also, and I think the first thing I learned about you is you're a podcaster.
Yes.
Don't know if you're going to talk about that or not, but I'd be interested in hearing a little bit. Maybe other people would too. But share with us some of the things that you're doing in COVID world right now that are innovative and creative.
Well, first I'd like to share just a little bit of the beginning of this process. I pastor a church which is 73% elderly. I mean, population 60 and up. It doesn't mean that they're not doing good things in the community. We had Easter caroling and things of that nature. But I realized that if we were going to jump into the internet, how do you do that? Mm-hmm. What do you do? How do you make that work? I'm still not a Zoom expert, but I bought a green screen. Eventually we're going to get there. But what we're doing is we created a community, and from the very beginning, it did not have to look like church. I didn't meet in the sanctuary. I didn't speak from the sanctuary. I'm actually sitting at the dining room table of my house. And this is where we have church. It's kind of informal, laid back. We greet one another. Those things are important. We have taken communion together. I figure if we consecrate it here, it goes there. We have people from Florida, North Carolina, Altoona, Harrisburg, Reading area, and we have a couple from Portugal that comes on from time to time. Connecting the community to form an actual community that looks more like a church has been our struggle at this point, not in a negative way, but that's what we want. We want to get them cooperating, and the responses that we make, we want them to carry those out where they are. I think COVID for us, just like 9/11 dried up the oceans, COVID dried up geography. I don't think you have to live in the same state. I don't think you have to live in the same country. I think you have to feel a connection in the community. Mm. That's what we have right now. I've learned a bunch of things of how to put this together, and I've made my share of mistakes. A trial and error, and more of it's error during the trial. But we are reaching out to people all over. We don't exactly know all of the audience, because on Facebook, if they don't respond, you don't know they're there. We get some count from what Facebook gives us at the end, but we've continued to do this. It's kind of neat. One of the highlights of what we have done is I put podcasting and this experience together. I was re-looking at a podcast where in my previous church, a man got a kidney and he was dying up until that point. We prayed him through. God gave him the kidney. And so I thought, geez, what would it be like to interview him 3 years later? So he was in the service, and I said to him, could we interview? And I interviewed him right online as a podcast. He wasn't visually on the screen. And we ended up with a good response to that. I was surprised how much interaction was taking place between people in the congregation, bouncing back and forth with comments, questions, connections. I think that's going to become a future event, a little more work, but a future event, bringing those in. I just finished a podcast today on a woman who lost her father. When we hit day 200, I don't know, it just rang a bell inside of me. And I began to think, oh, Lord. And how many people have died that I know personally? And there weren't many that I was really personal with. And so I interviewed her and her family situation. And I think that we have to realize that COVID is still very serious. It's, wear your mask. The whole route is very, very important. So these are the things we're doing in this church. We did it. We had an Easter choir. They went out and did what Ken's church is doing. They would distance themselves and just sing to the community. And that was spontaneous. Mm-hmm. I found out after they were out doing what they were doing. So I think that's all beautiful. As far as the internet, I see us maintaining a church presence. I do not feel comfortable making everybody come into what we had. Right. Because this church has something now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'd like to work on that and play with that. Mm-hmm.
So this question for you, Frank, and I'd invite others to kind of think about it too. What in all of this was the greatest challenge that you faced that you had to overcome?
Actually, the technology became the challenge for me. I'm an old duck. This isn't natural to me. And yet I've learned to do that. I mean, I made little videos in my past. I'm Apple, and Apple just, it works with people like me who don't have a lot of skill and creativity in that perspective. But I've grown. I listened to what people did. We did a pots and band children's worship connection for the week before Easter. And so we asked them to bring all their pots and pans into the computer room, the living room, wherever they were, and we're just going to clang and bang. And that worked out very well. We found that kids were bored because at that time there wasn't much of anything for them. So we asked them to paint rocks.
Yeah.
And they would bring those together. And it was, we were thinking of the passage on Palm Sunday where Jesus was questioned and he said, if I'm silent, even these rocks will give praise. Mm-hmm. And so we couldn't be together as a group. So those rocks had to give praise. So when we came back into worship shortly after we started, we brought the rocks in and made them a display on the communion table so that we could finally bring what we couldn't do together. Wow. People like coming to church the way they do. They come in their pajamas with their coffee. Mm-hmm. I don't see them, mm-hmm. It's just, they see me, I don't see them, but they enjoy that. Mm-hmm. I'd like to transform it over a little bit to Zoom. I don't know if that's going to work. You know what I'm saying? But we're open to that. That's what we've been doing. And we've been making these connections, continuing to make the connections. I've done one-on-one communication with people that are in the church, meeting needs, helping them deal with one family had a death issue coming, and we help them deal with that as well. Whatever they need.
Yeah. You have to find a way to respond to the various needs as they surface. What about the rest of you? What was the most significant challenge that you faced in really even going beyond online worship, but just doing the things you're talking about? Rebecca?
Oh, hi. So besides the technology, I think that's been a challenge for everyone. And one of the things I like to say about that is if a severely visually impaired woman can figure out how to make video, you can too. So really anyone can do it. But one thing I didn't want to forget is that, especially in Pennsylvania, in the area I'm in, there are a lot of people who do not have internet. And so it was, how can we continue to remain connected to people who legitimately do not have internet access? And so our solution, we discovered, was that actually the US Postal Service is very, very reliable. And the older generation especially loves to receive mail. Oh, they love mail so much. So what I did is I sat down every week and I would write, even if it wasn't the whole sermon, I would try to put down a meditation or a devotion or something, so that every week, especially during that beginning when it was such a stressful time, church people, especially people in nursing homes, would have something in their hands from the church that knew that we were thinking about them and praying for them. And we even I was able to put together a little booklet for Holy Week so that they could read a little Holy Week devotional. Our theme was the animals of Easter. And so even if they couldn't view our Easter services, they could still be connected in that way. And we got so much positive feedback from people who were just happy to get mail. So even though I'm not doing a weekly mailer anymore because that was exhausting, along with all the videos and everything else, that was a good lesson learned, that mail and getting something in someone's hand can leave a lasting impact.
And with some older adults, having that something in their hands and reading it not once, but reading it again and again and again. My father has a drawer in his house, has his church newsletter and things that are printed from the church. And I didn't realize he had it. It's like his archives. But Dad will take that stuff out and read it again, which is just, we have to remember some of those old traditional styles of communication are still very, very important. I still like getting mail. I don't get it very often, but I like getting mail. Kim?
Yeah, we have another question here. Someone's asking advice for creative ways to connect with schools or institutions or social groups explicitly outside the congregation.
Awesome. Anna? Anna's got her hand up.
So we're getting ready to launch an outreach to the local school district, and it really is just a matter for us of getting the children in our church and adults to write letters of appreciation to the teachers in the school, and then we're going to, I believe, give the teachers gift cards to a local business. That's another thing I wanted to mention about community connections. That's something we're working really hard on with the small businesses in our community. So like when we have guests who arrive at church now, they're gonna get a packet of homemade cookies from the local cookie baker, who is a gourmet cookie baker in our town, delivered to them. So again, you know, as much as we can do to be continuing to form relationships between community businesses, schools, so the gift cards for the teachers will be for a local coffee shop that is right by our church. So forming more relationship with the coffee shop as well, you know, that's what we're up to.
Awesome, thank you. Did I see some other hands up to respond to that question? Anyone else? I know some of our churches right now are doing community classrooms where their Harrisburg School District, whether it's the whole school district or not, I don't know, but a significant part of that, their classes are not meeting live. And there are parents, two parents or single parent households that have to work. There's no child care, the child is left alone to try and figure out how to navigate through the challenges of doing online classes. And so I know the Journey is one of our churches that is doing this. And they'll have anywhere from, I think they have maybe 40 children or kids that are enrolled, one high school senior and a lot of younger children, and maybe 15 come at a time. So they're not there every day. And it's a lot of work. It's when they wandered into it, they didn't realize just how enormous the task was. But it is, it's a big help for the city and for the families there. Kim?
Another comment from James Jacobs. He said their churches adopted a second grade class and prior to COVID would go in and do projects. Now they've transitioned to just being pen pals with each child, and the teachers and kids and parents all love that.
Wow. I love that idea. Way to go. That's awesome. So let's just we've got some remaining time here. This is an open think tank. And I encourage those of you who are viewing, like the tidbits that you're sharing are fantastic. It's a way of expanding the room. So as you have other ideas that you've experimented with that are working for you, go ahead and send it through the Q&A or chat, and Kim will find those for us. Frank, did you have something?
Yeah, something that Rebecca was talking about. We ended up doing phone streaming.
Yeah.
When you have 73% of your community are 60 and up, computers aren't really the way they go. Mm-hmm. And we found that through that, we were able to launch the sermon. You know, we do a live sermon with them, but we also put the podcast up on Wednesday. So they had something else to go to. And we have a Zoom Sunday school class that we're going to try to record and put that up so that you're giving those seniors who really are just looking for something, different avenues to feed their soul, so to speak.
So those call system, that system that you're using, who are you using and what does it cost?
It's phone live streaming, I believe is the name of it. And it costs us $30 a month. It depends on the amount of minutes you use.
I gotcha.
But we had people visit who are in our community, are not able to either go to a church or they're not connecting with their home church. And my predecessor, Al Forrest, is now in retirement pastoring. Mm-hmm. And he went on vacation and all of his people basically, they came to the church just by picking up a phone.
Yeah, that's great. I know a lot of our rural churches in some parts of annual conferences, it is the only way that they're able to have that kind of communication.
I hate to be a bearer of bad news, but I'm going to go dead. I probably won't be here by the time you end. That's
I'm hoping you're talking about your internet service or your.
No, I'm talking about the battery, not
Okay.
not a literal. I'll be alive after this call.
Well, if we don't get to say it now, thank you for joining us. And if you have questions for Frank Miller, you can find him on our conference email listing, and I'm sure he'd be glad to answer your questions and connect you. And glad you were with us. Kim.
Yeah, I have another question here. Suggestions for doing online worship and Bible study at home if there's no internet or technology at the church. Any suggestions about how to do that?
Yeah, I just shared that. Basically, all they have
with the phone streaming.
Go through Facebook, create an account, and you do not even have the persons coming on don't need to have Facebook. They can link their way in.
Yeah, and other people in the chat are responding to that as well. So thank you.
Yeah. Good. Helping each other out here. What's going to be next for you all as you're thinking about stuff? What are you hearing about that you're going to experiment with? Anything? Anna?
Well, you asked me before to talk about Sermon Rewind, and I neglected to talk about that. So that's something we do on Sunday nights. And again, it's to encourage people, as David was saying earlier, not just to be reading the scripture, but to be interacting with it so that they apply it to their lives. And so whatever preacher preached on Sunday morning, they then hop on Sunday night, and it's a totally open forum. People can ask whatever questions they want about the text, about the sermon. They can offer prayer requests. It's an opportunity for us to share what's coming up in the week. So we're thinking about changing that to a different night, maybe Monday night, just to give people a little more time to see how the sermon percolates within their week. But that's been a neat thing for us.
Cool. I see some of you, Rebecca in particular, you list yourself as a blog writer, read, write, and pray. Are you finding that to be a pretty good vehicle for staying connected with folks in this time?
Actually, that accidental connection happened really well. So I view myself first and foremost as a pastor, but I'm also a pastor who loves to write. So before the COVID pandemic, I had written a book about the United Methodist Church and disability. And before that, I had a short chapbook of just a book of poems that we donated all the proceeds to the church for. But in being an author, a lot of that is figuring out how to network and communicate with, they call it an audience, I would call it a congregation. They call it a platform, I would call it outreach and evangelism. But so in reading and researching and developing an online presence and an author website and learning about blogging and website building, all of that was really easily transferable into church world. And so it's really beautiful to see that synthesis of figuring out, I feel like when I write something, I want to write something important. So I want to write about God. And so it's all part of mission.
So if anybody has an interest in that and exploring that, you'd be a great person to talk to.
Yeah. So my author blog focuses on books because I love to read. I do book reviews. I've written book reviews in the past for different publications. Faith, because I'm a pastor and it's all about faith. And then also just disability awareness. I was really surprised that there was such a need for that niche of the intersection, especially of faith and disability awareness. But it's a really growing field of ministry.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you for that. And we just lost Frank. Frank's gone. But there shall be a resurrection. Kim?
Someone's interested in ideas for how to connect with parks and recreation organizations. Anybody have any experience with connecting with your local parks or recreation organizations?
Anna.
So this isn't exactly what you're asking, but there is a state park near us, a Pinchot, that they have summer chaplains. So somebody from our church actually applied to be a summer chaplain there last year and spent the whole summer preaching and pastoring to people at the park. So I'm sure that is the case for other state parks as well, but I don't have anything in terms of more local. And he's a lay person, so lay people can do that if they feel called.
David, do you have an insight in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really COVID related, but we did kind of a backwards fundraiser a couple years ago for a youth mission trip that we went on, where we just called the local borough who runs our Parks and Rec department, and we said, hey, is there anything we could do to serve you? And they said, actually, yeah, it'd be great. Paint this bridge, because we just always get volunteers to do it. So if you could paint that bridge, that'd be awesome. And so we did. And then what we did was we had the students go and invite their friends and family and neighbors to sponsor us while we served the borough. So in the borough's eyes, they were seeing us just serving them, rather than nothing's wrong with selling hoagies or Sheets coupons or anything, but rather than doing those things, basically our community of support paid us to bless our community. So it's kind of like a double blessing. And then of course that puts us in in high regard with the local community as well.
I know that Taylor Pfaff at Rockville Church, part of the Lingelstown Life Campus, one of the things that he's working on, and Taylor, if you're online, you might correct me if I'm wrong about this, but there are a lot of runners, near Front Street in Harrisburg. There's a trail or a place for running, and they're connecting with folks on the trail with water bottles. They're going to create one of those water stations where you can refill a bottle, pure, clean water kind of a thing, and be able to engage in conversation. And that's a way, I mean, that's not a park and recreation kind of thing, but it is being out there where people are recreating, maybe not parking. Are there other questions, Kim?
Lenore Hosier suggests that park chaplains go through the Pennsylvania Council on Churches to get connected to that work.
Okay. David, and then I've got one announcement to make, and we're probably going to be close to being done, but go ahead, sir.
Yeah, a moment ago you asked what's on the horizon. What are we dabbling in? What are we thinking about? And coming back around to something that Anna said with the online campus of the Camp Hill, I think that's where we need to start moving, is away from our online church experience is just for people who can't be in the building currently, to fully legitimizing church online. What does it look like for someone? Frank was talking about people from Portugal and Florida who worship. Okay, that's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's a blessing. How can those folks volunteer? How can they serve? How can they use their gifts to serve the church and serve the community? Not just writing a check. That's a good thing too. And so we've begun to kind of turn the corner to stop looking at church online as just a window into our two worship gatherings, but instead looking at it as, okay, how is this a customized experience? And I think that's the direction that we're going. I think Anna, what you guys are doing at Camp Hill sounds fantastic. And that's not quite where we're heading, but I think that's where we all need to be thinking is, if we're going to continue this on, what is our vision for it? Is it just for people who want to see what in-person looks like, and so they want to come to in-person? Or is it for people who worship online exclusively? And if that's legitimate, then we need to honor that and hold it in high regard, so that people can fully live out their faith in some way. And so, in the relationship with God, the church, and the world, how do they do that through our online campus? So that's kind of the direction that we're thinking right now. Now we just have to figure out exactly how we live it out.
And I think one of the gifts that none of us asked for this past Christmas, that COVID is giving us, is this chance to reorganize, rethink, break down some of the walls, get away from we've never done it that way kind of a thing. And I celebrate that as a veteran church planter, to constantly be looking at the landscape of culture, asking the question, what does it take for us to build bridges to where they are, rather than expect them to come where we are? And what are the innovative things that we need to be doing for such a time as this to do that? I want to thank you all for being with us today, and for our panelists, and for your sharing of your very practical ideas. And and experiments of how you're getting at accelerating the ministry of Christ, even in a time of COVID. I do want to say that there's going to be a webinar sponsored by, at the end of the month, on Thursday, October the 29th from 1 to 3. Scott McKenzie and I are going to be leading the financial challenge, how to finish well in 2020 and start the new year strong. Scott is a senior vice president and partner with Horizon Stewardship. I was a professional stewardship consultant back in the day. It's a topic that interests me, and I know churches are wondering, what can we do to strengthen that aspect of our ministry? But thank you all for being here and for your time today. You are amazing. Bless you, and thanks everybody for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.